and physical space, how can it become, a lot more intelligent in terms of making things easier on people in a smarter way?
And by the way, if you're just joining us, this is TechLines, a panel discussion about whether email is dead or dying and what the alternatives or the improvements to it might be. And I'm joined by, on my right, the man who is about to interrupt me by saying something intelligent, Mark Pesce, futurist, Adele Beachley from Research in Motion. Here is Alistair Rennie from IBM, and over there, far away but close in many ways, is Genevieve Bell. Now, we're talking about specific things we can do to communicate better in the workplace, Mark.
I mean, Alistair, part of it is that when you think about an inbox, and everyone thinks about an inbox, immediately what they think of is there's a linear list and a bunch of folders.
Yep.
Oops.
Yeah,
Somehow,
exactly.
We've got to be able to sort of set fire to that and forget that that ever happened and sort of go, okay, how can we rethink the fact that we have all of this wonderful communication, all of this wonderful media coming from all of these people? How can we re-present that?
And how can we? Don't just ask the questions, pal. Give us an answer.
It's my job to ask the questions.
Come on. How? How, damn it?
Well, the thing is that there's no one right answer. A lot of that's going to be driven by what do you want to do? What do you want to do today? What do you want to do right now? What task are you trying to perform? What group are you working with? There's actually a different answer for everyone, and that's part of what the failure's been, is that we have one inbox structure for everyone, but we actually need a whole bunch of different answers.
Yep.
Is that avoiding it a little bit? Well, how can you design something that provides?
I think he's right, because
Really?
you start to look at
There you go.
I'm not but the key thing that you keep getting on is context, right? So what's important to me is very different first thing Monday morning than it is Friday night, and I think part of that's going to be, how do you take all of the metadata that started to sort of circulate around collaboration and start to let people start to set I'll call them profiles, or work profiles, time profiles, and gradually tune them to be trustable. Because the trick with what you're talking about is you can customize and filter things. People need to trust the view they're getting, right? They need to not be suspicious that they're missing the one thing. So make it tunable, make it trustable, but the context will never stop shifting. So you can never get a precise answer. It's going to be a constantly evolving.
You have to know that.
Genevieve, he's been wishy-washy, isn't he?
He's a futurist. But I am struck in listening to my favourite futurist, of course, that the great irony is here, what we're talking about is working out how to re-engineer the PAs and secretaries we all got rid of. You want someone who understands context, who knows what you should be doing, who pays attention to which messages you should answer or not, who gives you the metadata, who flags for you what's significant. We all know what that is. I mean, those all once existed, and in a forms of sort of Taylorism, organisational efficiency, globalisation, changing notions of what the workforce should be. In some ways, that particular kind of person, which was a highly specialised task, in fact, and was a highly specialised kind of institutional memory and organisational skill set, we devolved it back to ourselves and suddenly discovered we have this huge problem.
But that's the client conversation, is how do we sort of enable productivity in an entirely different workforce structure.
And how do you think we solve that problem? Re-employ them all?
Well, we do have an unemployment problem. It's not an entirely novel thought. I mean, there's a couple of ways of thinking about it, right? One is I want to kind of unhelpfully suggest communication was different when we paid for it by the word. I mean, I think, you go back to sending telegrams. We know telegrams were much more snippy when you had to pay 10 cents a word.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the kind of interesting ideological frameworks around email is that we somehow have this notion that it's free. I mean, email is this kind of free and easy form of communication.
Am I going to get a bill one day?
It's not free when it comes to attention. That's the
I'm
thing.
aware of that, but it's how do you make visible? That would be an interesting kind of thing. So I mean, I understand the whole, basically having a secretary and a PA for your inbox, and wouldn't that be lovely? But I also wonder about how you make visible the work of it all, because I mean, this whole kind of...
Is that what you mean when you say it's not free? The cost in time?
Yeah. And also the cost in mental attention.
Yeah.
I think your starting preamble here about going, well, I spend 3 hours a day doing email, and is that really quote unquote work? Is sort of an interesting way of thinking about what does it mean to say we've reinvented work. Well, part of the way we've reinvented work is we've changed the notion of how you communicate.
But then where email has mobilised is it's gone out of the office, so it's gone away from being chained to the desk. So Well,
It's not
yeah,
just
but
her fault.
of course it's not. But I mean, it's putting time back into your day, right? So I mean, it's not all about, you know, where you were coming from in the sense like, oh my God, I've got like 3 hours of email and it's just completely overwhelming, coupled with the fact that, you know, we don't use all of the email functionality to basically help us with some of these tasks or, you know, replace certain kind of human aspects.
It's created a whole series of issues to Adele where we don't actually know where the right places are to answer email. I mean, we've got to a point where we can take it everywhere with us, but I think we're still working out, is it okay to sit in a, you know, you worry about people sitting on sofas twittering each other. I have more stories that I have collected of late of people doing their email in bathrooms. So sitting on the loo doing email. Interesting in many ways. All the other places that people now also think about.
It used to be
email.
such a peaceful place, didn't
It was a quiet
Peaceful
place.
time.
Quiet, no, not so much anymore.
Not for you?
No, not me. Others, thank you. Others. Let's be clear here. Others. But I do think, you know, we haven't quite worked out at what point is email. This goes back to this notion of social rules, right? When is email sufficiently urgent?
But it also
that you need
comes
to
back
pull
to,
the
you know,
thing out?
who's the persona utilising these tools, right?
Now
Because
explain that to us.
Well, there's multiple personas. So, I mean, even though you've got social networking, fine, you know, we're all on Facebook, we're all on Twitter, you know, in the workplace, are people using those social tools in the workplace on either devices or tools that are being provided by the enterprise? And in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. But, you know, it comes back to a kind of security question as well, which is, well, hey, I want to retain talent, I want to have all of this type of stuff. I want, you know, I want people to bring in their own technology and put it onto my network because that's going to make them happy because they've got their kind of personal work-life balance there. But the reality is that, you know, the security policies need to change to be able to address that balance.
Because that is complicated, isn't it? People used to have all their secure information, personal and private. Well, they used to have it on bits of paper, I suppose, but then they used to have it on a computer that never went anywhere.
Yeah.
Then they used to have it on a computer that was more portable.
Yeah.
Now they have it on a thing this big, and
It's out in the cloud.
so you can lose things a lot more easily as well.
You
one
can.
big
It's a dilemma for
organisation
the
found out.
enterprise, though, in terms of like messaging and email and what's on there, is that there is personal and there's also corporate data on there.
Yeah.
So that's really.
And
that's
where's the line, I suppose?
Well,
That
it
becomes
is where the
fuzzy.
line. I mean, if you lose your device that you've brought into an organisation, what's going to happen? Is you know, who owns all of the data on there? Is it you, or is it the corporation? And what does the corporation do with the data that's on there?
Are you asking me?
Of course, I'm asking you. Maybe I'm asking Mark, right? You know
No.
everything.
By the way, we should mention at this point that Google and Microsoft were invited to be a part of this conversation, but unfortunately weren't able to attend. Now, Mark,
Google is still in mourning.
what were you going to say? Nothing.
I wasn't going to say anything.
I think she
I
was
put it
saying that you were going to
across
say
to you.
something.
Oh,
You were going to violently disagree with Adele, weren't you?
absolutely not.
No, good.
Oh, that's right. But
But again, the notion of having multiple personas on
Yeah,
individual devices
absolutely.
is
I mean,
kind of critical.
Yeah, this is the problem, is that the device, and part of it's because the device, whether it's, you know, your iPad or your phone or whatever it is, it's become the nexus for all of the communication. The more that happens, the muddier it gets. It's not going to get less muddy. It's never going to get clean. And so I guess, yes, it's very important for organizations, particularly when they're dealing with confidential information, to be able to figure out how they can segregate that data.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe it never lives on the device itself. It's always out there on the cloud, so that if the device falls into enemy hands, it doesn't matter because the data is out there on the cloud.
The cloud, of course, yeah. Genevieve, any thought on those security, personal, private issues?
Trying to think about who the enemy is in all of this.
Who is the enemy, Mark?
Mark will know.
What do you
We
perceive
met
the enemy
and
is?
he's us. I don't know.
The enemy is for you is Genevieve, isn't it?
Right now.
Yeah,
Do I punch him?
Oh, yeah, you can thump him now. That'd be good. Yeah,
on
good.
her behalf.
No, exactly.
You could throw that. No, you,
I could just get over and hit him if I was really, you know, I could send him email. I could email Adele. Adele, hit him. Yeah, I mean, the privacy stuff's interesting, right? We've done a bunch of studies on this of late, and one of the things we've found is that the consumers we were talking to, much less concerned about privacy in the traditional sense as about things like age, income, who you were, much more worried about what you were up to. And in fact, one of the things we've found is we've started to kind of spin out a futurist scenario about, you know, what happens when you've got this one device in your hand that does everything, and it starts to learn about you, because there's clearly not a one-way relationship, right?